Coming up, the ICT Newscast hits the road. We're at the 2022 Reservation Economic Summit. We're talking to a leader in economic development, a restaurateur, and the head of tribal relations at the U.S. Agriculture Department. I am Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
The Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University is honored to be a supporter of Indian Country Today. ASU offers the only online undergraduate digital media literacy degree, teaching students how to recognize and combat inaccuracies on all platforms. They are using cutting-edge tools and tactics to separate fact from fiction in a digital world overloaded with misinformation. Learn more at cronkite.asu.edu.
This is the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez.
Ku'watsi Hopa, and welcome to the homelands of the Nuivi, also known as the Southern Paiute people. We're broadcasting the ICT Newscast this week from Las Vegas, Nevada for the 2022 Reservation Economic Summit. This gathering is hosted by the National Center for American Indian Enterprise Development. Let's learn more about RES.
In Las Vegas, Nevada, thousands of people will gather for RES 2022. It's an opportunity for Native entrepreneurs and business owners to come and grow their craft. Attendees spend a span of 3 days networking, developing business plans, and one-on-one consulting. The CEO and president of the National Center for American Indian Enterprise Development, Chris James, says he's impressed by Native resilience.
Today, I am proud of what the people in this room did through harsh and difficult times, and that we're now meeting at a moment of tremendous optimism and opportunity.
The conference features speakers and workshops with tribal leaders, members of Congress, federal officials, and state and local lawmakers, and even top CEOs. Some of the topics include gaming, entrepreneurship, business, healthcare, and even entertainment. Last year, actor and producer Wes Studi says now is the time.
One of the things that I have always heard about the business that I'm in is that, oh, well, they're telling our stories. I think a time is coming very soon wherein we're able to mesh the capital that's required to actually finance our own stories. And that's when we'll be able to say that, yes, this is a total Native perspective film.
RES had over 200 exhibitor booths on the floor and over 6,000 sessions to attend in 2021. Alyssa London returns hosting RES TV this year. She says they have been working hard to bring the best this year.
I mean, it just keeps getting bigger every year, and this is really only the second one that we've been able to get back together since COVID. And so I know that the team has, put a lot of time and effort to make sure that there are a lot of venues for Native business leaders to connect. And I think we'll have a really good time.
In Las Vegas, Nevada, Caitlin Onawa, Boycell, ICT News.
In Northwest Canada, a member of the royal family is fresh off the heels of meeting with Indigenous people. Last week, Prince Charles and Duchess Camilla visited the Dene community of Detta in the Northwest Territories. The visit came as part of his 3-day royal visit to Canada. Charles met with residential school survivors and formally acknowledged their suffering in a speech.
All leaders have shared with me the importance of advancing reconciliation in Canada. We must listen to the truth of the lived experiences of Indigenous peoples, and we should work to understand better their pain and suffering.
Charles also spoke about climate change, saying Indigenous knowledge ways are essential to tackling the issue.
We simply must learn practical lessons from traditional knowledge through deep connections to land and water, about how we should treat our planet, and above all, recognize the vital importance of taking into account the seventh unborn generation.
The royal couple also attended a feeding and fire ceremony. The visit was part of the monarch's Platinum Jubilee celebration. In Vermont, 4 state-recognized tribes will no longer have to pay property taxes. Governor Phil Scott signed the historic bill into law last week. Scott told lawmakers he signed the legislation out of respect for the state's native communities. However, the bill also comes with some hefty stipulations. Tribes benefiting from this exemption cannot lease or rent their land for profit. Don Stevens, chief of the Noligan Band of Coosac Abenaki Nation, says the bill is a good first step. The new legislation will go into effect on July 1st. A few Native communities have been selected to beef up their support for art and culture. Earlier this month, the Association of Tribal Archives, Libraries, and Museums announced its project cohort. They include the Alabama Coshada Tribe of Texas, the Choctaw Nation, the Ho-Chunk Nation, the Iowa Tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, Pamunkey Indian Tribe, and the Pueblo of Acoma. The museums from these communities will participate in a 2-year project. They will receive training and mentorships from planning consultants to preserve their cultural and artistic traditions. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. Coming up, barbecue is a family tradition for the Anderson family and agriculture policy for Native farmers. But first, what's new at the National Center? That and more from Las Vegas, Nevada. Stay with us. Chris James is the president and CEO of the National Center for American Indian Enterprise Development. It is the largest business development and technical assistance training organization in the country for American Indian and Alaska Native-owned businesses. Hi, Chris. Great to see you.
Hi, good to see you.
Welcome to Las Vegas. We're here at Res 2022. It's day 1, so tell us how you're feeling getting this conference started.
I feel absolutely great. I am super excited about Res 2022. We have a packed day of business training today. Kicks off about 1 o'clock. 2 motivational speakers at lunch today, and then it keeps on going through the rest of the week.
I really want to talk about how this conference goes on behind the scenes, because there's so many details, right? We were just talking about gift bags, but then there's speakers and there's event spaces. Kind of tell us what goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah, this year is an amazing Res. We have right around 300 speakers, close to 70 breakout sessions. We have full meals for all of our guests. We have 70 artisans, 200 trade show booths. So the size of Res is larger than anything we've ever put together. We also are expecting about 3,400 guests this year, which is roughly double than what we had in 2017 when I started.
Yeah, and I actually want to talk about that because you've been with the National Center now for 5 years. Yeah. In the 5 years that you've been here, what kinds of changes have you seen be made?
The National Center has always, over our 50-year history, focused on that technical assistance and support for businesses. So when I arrived on board in 2017, I ramped that up. I developed new programs, brought on the right people to really support our American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian businesses. And with Res, we focused on the primary Res event here in Las Vegas. Historically, we had regional events, which were very nice, but I said, let's focus all on the one event. And so it's really now more of our annual conference, our annual gathering.
Yeah, and I could imagine, I mean, we're talking about Las Vegas. We're seeing more and more tribal enterprises in the city, but to maybe talk about, how much that Res actually spurs the economy here in Las Vegas and really, creates something to celebrate here.
Absolutely. Well, just with our guests, with 3,400 guests, I mean, their own renting motel rooms, their own spending outside of our event is a significant revenue and amount of people. We're actually one of the larger conferences that Las Vegas has. Now, of course, they have some mega conferences, but we're, I guess, a medium-sized conference. Also, for the actual revenue for Res itself as a driver for the economy. It's a costly conference to put on, but it definitely, the amount of people, that job creation here in Vegas is amazing. I mean, you're talking hundreds of people of working behind the scenes.
Right. And coming back from the pandemic, I imagine that that's much needed for the city, but also for the artisans here. Maybe talk about, the people who are going to be selling here and are hoping to make some sales.
Absolutely. And I think the pandemic for the National Center, we've done pretty well through the pandemic with Res. Seems like we've hit a couple of positive windows, which is just pure luck. And I think good planning. With our artisans, because of the ability to double the amount of artisans that we have, we'll have vendors that are selling jewelry and other handmade crafts. We vet all of our artists through a process so that we authenticate what they're selling. So that's exciting too. And yeah, they're ready to sell. I mean, we're just behind us, we can see them setting up and they're ready to go. Those artisans are businesses, and being able to support them is really important to us at the National Center. And also those artisans, they get a full pass to Res. So they can go to any of the sessions, they can eat, they can go to the reception. And that was really important to us to really infuse them into the event.
Right. And there's so many attendees at Res from all areas of, society. I mean, there's even policymakers here. And that's one of the things that the National Center does, is talk to policymakers about, what Native people need. So who are you going to be talking to, and what are you going to be talking to about?
Well, we have several folks from Congress that'll be here and on various panels. We have 2 representatives from the White House. Director Rodriguez is pretty high up with her intergovernmental affairs, so she's right in the president's circle. We have the administrator of SBA that's going to be speaking, and a lot of SBA activity. The Department of Energy is here, and they have a full energy day and breakout sessions focusing on energy-related things. USDA has presenters every day, including the Secretary of USDA. We have the Federal Reserve Bank, National Federal Reserve Banking System, where the actual Chairman Powell will be doing a speech on Tuesday. So just a lot of policymakers that are here to listen and do listening sessions, but also get recommendations.
Yeah. Well, I want to make sure that folks can follow along on social media. So where can people find the National Center and stay connected?
We are on Facebook, Instagram. Our Instagram is @NCAIED. You can also follow me @ChrisJames_NC. So I'm also on social media as well.
Great. Well, we'll keep in touch. Chris, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the partnership with Indian Country today. I'm really excited about Res 2022.
James Anderson is an international speaker and trainer. He is a previous 40 Under 40 award recipient, and he's back at Res 2022 this year. Hi, James. Great to see you.
Good morning, Buju.
You're giving some really important speeches. Let's start off with your keynote speech. What are you planning to address?
Well, basically the idea is I was been a speaker trainer for 20 years and kind of passing on the principles I learned from my dad, who's famous Dave Anderson of the barbecue restaurants. And all of a sudden it's gone. And there was a week there where I was spending the whole week canceling all my trainings and organizations because there was no events. And I was really having a pity party for myself. And my wife and kids didn't want to be around me because I was just so stressed. And the idea that everything's over. And then I remembered a gym I go to, they also do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And the master is always wanting me to do that. And I'm like, no. And one time I went in just to go watch, and what they do is they have on the wall, and they have a saying by another Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu master. It says, you don't rise to the occasion, you fall back on your training. You don't rise to the occasion, you fall back on your training. And I remember that kind of spurred in my mind. I'm like, man, I've got all this workshop, all these workshops, all these trainings I've been working with people on. Use what I've learned. Stop having a pity party and use it. And so what I decided to do was buy my own restaurant concept and start the restaurants and use what I've learned of energy, taking care of your people, getting in the trenches and working side by side. These are things I taught for years and years. Now I have an opportunity to do it and see how it works. And it works. So my speech today is about remembering what we've learned and using that moving forward. And it works, and it will help people be successful moving forward in their lives.
Wow. I mean, that is so, and I think the other message from that is to take a chance, right?
Yes.
It sounds like you're taking a chance on this restaurant business. I'd actually love to learn more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Lakudere Ojibwe from northwestern Wisconsin, and I'm also part Choctaw. See, my grandmother and my grandfather were orphaned by the Bureau of Indian Affairs long ago and sent to Haskell Institute for Indians. And there they were, of course, their ways were changed, but that's where they met. And eventually they moved back up to the north, and my grandfather would take my grandma down south every weekend until she learned how to cook Southern. Because she's from the plain north and he's from the south. And so we've got a lot of family recipes, including what my dad, and our family has always been about barbecue. So we named the restaurant Jimmy's Old Southern Barbecue. And we're about to have 5 locations in the Twin Cities area, and we're hoping to open up in Choctaw soon. So we're very proud to be a Native-owned business and very proud of our roots. And we're very proud that we have a mantra of we take care of our people and we serve great food. People and food, food and people. And that's what we care about. And it's been a fantastic ride. And once again, as a trainer, you think after years of telling other people who are running their businesses, and I'm running a business too, does my stuff really work? Does it apply? And I'm here to say, yes, it does. It applies, whether you're at the Indian Country Today news station, or you're in a casino, or you run your own beating company. That energy, that enthusiasm, that drive, that passion, all that stuff works. And it worked 20 years ago. It will work 20 years in the future. These are the items that we must preserve. Just like in our own cultures, we preserve what works. And then we evolve and change some things that we need to. That creates growth.
I'm sure you learned a lot of these core values from someone, and you've mentioned your dad being the founder of Famous Dave's. Talk about a household name, right?
Yeah.
Like my whole family loves going to Famous Dave's. Maybe talk about some of the values that he instilled in you through his business of owning this barbecue company.
Well, what you said is taking a risk. I mean, Famous Dave's, he opened the first Famous Dave's in Hayward, Wisconsin, by our tribe, just like 500 meters off of our reservation. And it's this town of 2,000 people, and people are like, what are you building this up here for? It's nothing but Swedes and Indians up here. Why? You got to go someplace like Texas or Memphis or the Carolinas. And he's like, but if you listen to him, there would be no Famous Dave's. So he believed in himself. And also he was involved in creating grand casinos for the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe. And I remember as a young kid traveling up to a cornfield in central Minnesota, and him taking people and saying, this could be a beautiful gaming and a resort and complex. And they're like, uh-huh. And today the Mille Lacs Band has been running their grand casinos, Hinckley and Mille Lacs, for years and years and years, and creating so much.
And he helped found that?
Yes. He was the idea of bringing investors up and saying, look at this. And it's literally a field. I mean, there's nothing around. It's halfway between Minneapolis, Minnesota and Duluth, and there's nothing. But he saw something, and that's his gift, is to see what others don't see and the drive to make it happen.
Right. Well, I love all of those, and we're really excited to watch your speech later today. James Anderson, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
The Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C. is working to improve its relations with tribal nations. At the helm is Heather Dawn Thompson. She is the director of the Agriculture's Department's Office of Tribal Relations. Hi, Heather. Thank you for joining our newscast.
Thank you so much for having me.
So you've been in this position now since the beginning of the year. Tell us what major initiatives you've been working on and are proud to report on.
Oh gosh, I'm just really honored to work for this secretary and this administration. They've been so forward-leaning on the initiatives they're working on. I think three that are particularly important that Indian country's been paying attention to is one, the secretary announced a commitment to expansion of tribal self-determination. And while that might seem really commonplace for those that work with Department of Interior a lot, it's not something we've really been focusing on at Department of Agriculture. So that's been relatively historic, and we're very excited about that. Second is the Indigenous Food Sovereignty Initiative, which I think we're going to talk a little bit more about. And then third is a joint secretarial order, which is between Secretary Vilsack from USDA and Secretary Holland from the Department of Interior that encourages us as the primary federal public trust land manager, so U.S. Forest Service, BLM, national parks, to really work better with tribal nations and to find opportunities to manage those properties together.
There's been a huge increase of Native staffers working at the Agriculture Department. Do you think that that increase in Native staffers has sort of translated to an increase in success or initiatives for Native people?
Definitely. My colleague, who's also from the Cheyenne Sioux Reservation, Zach Duchesneau, has been appointed to be in charge of the Farm Services Agency, for example, and he just has a different lived experience, right? He has been a Native producer his whole life, and he brings that to the table. So he understands intimately the challenges that Native producers have in accessing finance and other programs at USDA. So I think it's really changed the whole landscape of the conversation.
Yeah, and I could imagine, just having people with different lived experiences in the room is so important. I want to go back to the Food Sovereignty Initiative that you talked about. We've reported a little bit about it, but tell us some more.
It is my most favorite initiative and what I'm most passionate about. The Department of Agriculture is amazing. It's one of the largest departments in the entire federal government. And we touch on all aspects of life in rural America, which means rural Americans or Native Americans, right, for the most part. But if it had been designed from the beginning from an Indigenous perspective, it would probably look quite different, right? I say it's the buffalo and berry plan. We look at foods quite differently. We look at our food systems differently. And so this initiative has challenged us all at USDA to really think differently about what foods we're subsidizing, where you can get financing and what types of foods you can get financing for. The bison is a really good example. We're really rethinking how we're investing in bison, both from a procurement standpoint, but from cultural perspectives as well.
What has been the reaction since this initiative was launched? As you mentioned, one of the big things that I saw when this initiative was announced was the fact that, as you mentioned, subsidized foods can now be tailored to Native people. But what has been the reaction of it?
That's exactly right. In the FDIPR program, or commodities, how we call it at home, historically, the federal government purchased whatever they wanted to purchase, sort of at the national level. And it wasn't local foods and it wasn't Indigenous foods. And the Indian country has been asking for this change for quite some time. And so we have this new pilot project where 8 tribes are able to design their own food, pick which contractors they want to purchase from, and it's no surprise. They're buying Indigenous foods from Indigenous producers, and it's been incredibly successful.
Well, we'll have to report on that again in the future to kind of see what the outcomes are. I want to switch gears and talk about this equity commission that the Agriculture Department is leading. There's a Colville citizen that's on it. What kinds of updates do you have from that?
Yes, we actually have 2 tribal citizens on the equity commission. We're very excited about that. They have met several times now, and they have had very hard conversations. You can imagine, as I just shared, USDA was not created from necessarily an Indigenous perspective or from minority farmers' perspective. And so there are some challenges, some very real challenges, both now and historically, about how the programs operate. And so I appreciate the honesty in which they bring to this conversation and the challenges that they have brought to us to really think about.
Yeah, and I can imagine that those are some really hard conversations. I want to switch gears and talk about Res, because you, of course, are here to do some workshops and lead some workshops. Tell us about the subjects and what you'll be talking about.
We're really excited. We have three 3 panels called Food Sovereignty is Economic Sovereignty. And what we are bringing to the tribal nations is a proposal to become more engaged in food businesses. So the supply chain issues. I think people saw in COVID how difficult supply chain issues are and how susceptible and vulnerable our communities are. So while most producers, farmers and ranchers are decreasing in numbers, we're actually increasing in Indian country. The challenge is we don't have the businesses to support that. The distribution companies, the grocery stores, the meat processing and production programs. And so we're challenging Indian country and tribes to think about getting engaged in that. And that's what these panels are all about. Right now, for every dollar that's spent on food, only 15% goes to the farmer, 15 cents. That means 85 cents tribes are leaving on the table.
That is a significant number. Well, Heather Dawn Thompson, thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you for having me.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For more news, visit IndianCountryToday.com. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives. I am Aaliyah Chavez.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.